My brother and I stood under the hastily fabricated shield domes and mobile point defense networks. We stared over the carnage, over the wreckage of slagged ships and twisted flesh, over the horrific price that had been paid, over the task that had finally dulled death's scythe. I swayed, steadied for a moment. Exhaustion that sapped the soul from my bones. I lit a cigarette with nerveless fingers. Had to pause a moment to remember how to inhale. Dropped the lighter to the ground when I missed my pocket. Felt the blinding pain of the migraine ease. I struggled to remember how long I could go without a mask before oxygen toxicity began to damage my alveoli. Couldn't follow that train of thought to a conclusion. I stared as the great tracked dozers cleared the hecatomb of blood and steel, pushing fleets of troop carriers and battalions of soldiers into the burn pits. Easier to account for the living than to number the dead. My legs gave out under me. My brother fumbled to catch me, landing on his knees in the mire of blood and earth as I fell. I stared upward at the shields as another salvo of artillery impacted above our heads. The energy blasts were muffled, far quieter than their kinetic counterparts. Looked like the sky was falling as the impacts bloomed over the dome, flaring it blue into the visible spectrum. I stared at the dropships entering the shield gates. Lives beyond reckoning, fed to the gnashing teeth of the Terran war machine. Lives encased in fleshly forms far more fragile than my own. Soft, slow biology against an elite combat species. The weight of my armor threatened to crush my lungs and stop my heart as I lay there. An ignoble end to one of Terra's finest. It wasn't the weight, it was the tiredness. My brother got a foot under him, made a slight effort to rise, then stopped, just kneeling in the center of the chaos, of the Terran war machine as it strove to devour another world. I stared past his disfigured face at the helicopters thudding through the atmo, deploying howitzers on the western ridge. The wind shifted, carrying with it the fetor of plasma-burned skin and the screams of the wounded in the field hospitals. Dull, but not broken. Death had work yet to do. There was an ache in my left shoulder. It hadn't been feeling right. Pretty sure I'd smashed it against the dropship coming down the ramp. My brother undid the straps securing his armor, and the ballistic plates fell away from him. He shivered once as the wind stroked cold fingers across the exposed moisture of his sweat and others' blood. "What now?" I coughed the words through my burning throat. I noticed deep scores across the armor over my thigh. Had a disjointed memory of a shriek warrior punching talons toward me. The thudding blow that glanced off the angled plates but still threw me, spinning into the air. Remembered putting a shot through its chest, the roaring fangs as it came at me again. I flexed my quad experimentally, and the agony pried a groan between my teeth. My brother turned toward me. Shrike blood crusted sullen red across his hand and forearm. From over the horizon came the crump of shelling. In the darkening sky I could see the glow of HE ordnance on a high oxy world. "We protect the Marines." The cigarette had burned down to my lips. "They're Marines just like us." My brother stood finally. His voice was brittle. "We're gifted." I hated that word. Heard it too many times. "Not my fault." He whirled toward me, the ghastly scars across his face terrifying under the blue ripples of the ion shielding. "Neither is it theirs!" I felt the heat of the cigarette against my mouth, burning like my brother's eyes. "Neither is it mine. Neither is it the Shrike's." I couldn't hold his gaze. The eyes that had seen beyond the jump. Same eyes I had now. "They..." He stabbed a blood-covered hand toward the distant horizon, toward the flashes of the HE bombardment. "Those creatures are gifted too." I could see the tattoo, dark under the enemy blood smeared over his forearm. 11 numbers in Shrike script. I couldn't meet the gaze of the enhanced who stood over me. "I'm staying on that first wave, Ethan. It's gotta be someone, so it's gotta be me. Are you gonna keep up?" I couldn't meet his eyes, just looked at the outstretched hand. The cigarette burned. The weight of my armor threatened to crush my chest. Another plasma strike sapped the shields over my head. The desire to survive is hardwired. I heaved myself up, flicking the smoldering stub away. But when I reached for my brother's hand, something was wrong. Muscles that didn't obey my nerves and a shoulder joint that didn't track properly. A sob tore from my throat as my brother tried to pull me to my feet. Fresh blood pooled in my armor as I lay, flooded down my side, bright against the crusted gore. Have you ever heard a jump? A jump is the sound of shouting medics as you drift in and out of consciousness. Dropping from hyperspace as the docs try to keep you from respirating your own vomit. Screaming as the pain of your injuries finally overtakes the dregs of the combat stims. The sound of your brother raging against being left behind as you're transported to a fob hospital way out in the middle of nowhere void space, because you're an investment that's far too valuable to leave unrepaired. Kagshokad had been pretty once, lots of purple, but it was gray now, from the gun runs and from the boots of Marines. We sought to flood it red. The otherworldly crack thudded into my chest. I grunted and dragged in a replacement lungful of scorched atmo, involuntarily ducking as another Valor dual rotor thundered overhead, low and fast above the ruins. The distant crump of bombardment, shelling the far side of this once megalopolis, provided a base backdrop for the snap of rifles a few blocks distant. Above me I could see the glitter of plasma cannons in the darkening sky. 8 Reapers playing tag with the better part of a Shriek fleet on the edge of the void. We were a couple clicks into the city. Alpha Company, 1st Platoon. My brother in front, me behind. Staggered column of non-enhanced between us. Echo Company had been tasked to secure an FSB somewhere in this grid square. Slag-brained Earthers had not only failed to set up an FSB, but had failed to make their rendezvous. Alpha first sent to babysit them back. My brother raised his fist, and the Marines fanned out into cover against the lavender marbled white concrete the Xenos built everything load-bearing out of. I spun to check our 6. The city had been razed, nothing but shards of lilac stone like reaching fingers. The tallest remaining structure in our grid square was a monolithic skyscraper that had collapsed sideways, leaving the spire-like foundations scarce 10 meters tall. At one time it could have housed the population of the drive yards on Sol 4. Now it was an empty shell, the walls permeated with empty windows like blank eyes, watching impassively. Another crack split the air, this one closer, the shockwave sending fine powder into the air on the blast. A Marine coughed, and I winced in annoyance as it spiked the pain in my skull. The sound of the cough was high and piercing in comparison. We'd been on a stim drip for 7 hours. Overtuned senses made the distant fires too bright, and the stench of plasma burns nauseating. Active hearing protection inadequate against those constant low-level jumps. They'd been doing it for the past few hours. Troop transports jumping at a range short enough they didn't need the calibration stutter. Just a few clicks or even less to shovel hordes of Terran soldiers forward of the front lines, advancing faster than the surface-bound Shrike could react. Injecting Terran soldiers just behind any defensive perimeter the Xenos attempted to establish, keeping the enemy reeling back. Well, that was the idea anyway. I slapped at the pocket by my knee. Empty. I swore under my breath, swept my gaze over the slagged city around me. It had been beautiful once, decorated. Maybe a capital, larger than anything back on old Earth. Now it was ground down by the gun runs and leveled twice over by the bombardment over the past 3 days of this world's time. The wreckage made me nervous. Close! Too many hiding places, too many crevices where a sniper could lurk, too many dens where nests of warriors could lie in wait. Because if a Shriek got within 10 meters of me, my Marines were dead and Terra burned. The resistance had melted away after the first weeks. X-Day had been a bloodbath on a scale nothing but the industrialized carnage of the Terran war machine and the evolutionary specialization of an elite combat species could devise. But since that landing, the Shriek had burrowed their way into the crust of their world, into the tunnels and warrens and subterranean bunkers their engineers had constructed for just such an eventuality. Planetary siege. My brother mused that we were fighting a war far more primitive than the enemy had engaged in for centuries. Laying under the shield domes before uneasy sleep, he surmised that the lack of FTL capabilities that confined our species to our surface also forced our planetary tactics to develop further than the Shriek. He pointed upward to a Valar one day, flying low and fast with a belly full of Marines. "They don't have any equivalent to a helicopter," he shouted over the rotors. "We've seen thousands of drones, massive fleets, even some fighters through the Atmo. But they're not used to moving armies on the surface. They fight within the void. Because once you control the void space, you control the world. But we can jump right past both fleets and orbital defenses. They don't know how to fight this kind of war anymore. They don't know how to fight isolated from their ships." I was less cerebral. They retreated into their bunkers because it took away our only advantage. Forced us into CQC against an elite combat species. Forced us to come in and take them before their fleets overran the masquerade of our jumps. The resistance had melted away. Nothing but drone networks and autonomous autocannon units against our advance. Until this city, I was almost glad. Every nerve had strained to the breaking point, exhausted by the anticipation of a battle that hadn't come. Almost glad. Almost. There was half a company's worth of soldiers dug into the rubble ahead, the reason my brother had halted. Heads down, helmets pulled low over their eyes. A few of them were spitting on rags and trying to clean their masks of grime. Soft, slow biology that couldn't survive even the atmo of this high-oxy world. Sandwiched between two massive stone blocks fallen askew atop each other, a sniper stared through his scope, listening to the murmurs of his spotter. I liked snipers. Plasma weapons had some kind of exponential energy increase before the projectile destabilized. They were perfectly accurate, traveled faster, and required reloading once a century or so, as far as we could tell. But kinetics could reach just a fingertip further. My rifle's effective range was 1,200 meters. My sightline extended less than a score from where I stood. Too close. Range was our ally. Hey, enhanced. I felt under the band of my helmet, came away with a crushed pack of smokes, retrieved the last cylinder and put in between my lips. I didn't light it. Not yet. Hey, it was one of the Earthers. Fresh Marine folded into our company after half his own were on the wrong side of an ambush. The company hadn't had any enhanced, hadn't been protected, hadn't had a chance. I swept our six again. The rubble made me nervous. The sniper shifted almost imperceptibly. Range was our ally. I finally fixed the Earther with a flat stare. Hey, he seemed nervous suddenly. Do you sense any shriek? I swapped the cigarette to the other corner of my mouth. One of the other Marines swore loudly, and the heads all swiveled toward the noise. Speech was amplified easily by the headsets we all wore. Shut your mouth, fish! Cut the chatter, Lieutenant Briggs barked. My brother waved us forward. One by one, the Marines darted across some kind of courtyard to join the soldiers in the sniper's nest. My brother stayed at the last corner until all our Marines were in cover. Fish thinks we can sense shriek, I muttered to my brother as I passed him. After he darted across to join me again, he hissed back, hopefully the shriek think that too. I smirked briefly, matching my brother's half-smile. A thunderclap rolled across the surface from kilometers away, shaking the rubble and vibrating the stone under my feet. The artillery had hit something, probably another fuel cell depot. I brought my rifle up to stare at the blank windows of the fallen skyscraper through my optic. It's only the drugs make 'em good. I rolled the cigarette between my teeth, glancing sideways without lowering my rifle. This Marine was a little older, ragged from longer deployment, another one that got folded in. He was glowering at me while he spoke to the kid. Just the drugs that make 'em breathe this world like a Xeno. I dropped my rifle on its sling and lit the cigarette in response. Sucked down a lungful of carcinogens and felt the nicotine drain my migraine away. Been on the drip too long. Couldn't shut it off when everything was this close, though. When I had my Marines with me. The soldiers we had just joined were staring openly. Two maskless Marines. My brother in a mech suit that had him almost 30 centimeters taller than me. The mechs were exoskeletons designed to assist during heavy manual labor. Destroyer armament and the like. A lot of the enhanced began wearing them after X-Day. Slow, bulky, awkward, but brutally strong. I preferred to keep my reflexes, even at such a strength disadvantage against the enemy. A major ducked under the staccato thunder of another Valar as we made room for ourselves in the nest. Major Canizzaro! He shouted as the crack of a jump echoed through the concrete ruins. Lieutenant Briggs, Alpha Company, 1st Platoon. Yeah, we've been waiting for you. Waiting? The Major extended a hand, awkwardly as we all crouched in a circle. Knew they'd send someone to hunt us down. Can't use the comms yet. Don't know if the drone defense network is operational still. I flicked my gaze back to the ragged, angry Marine, then pivoted slightly on my knee to scan behind the Major, where a few clicks away oily smoke reached tendrils to feed the growing smog in the dusky sky. My brother was doing the same thing, looking behind me, instinctual at this point. This nest was claustrophobic. My brother had always been better at hiding the unease. Half my boys met the wrong end of a biome half a click back. I had seen them. Rather seen the uniforms that used to have men in them. Saw something odd ahead, the Major continued. Thought maybe we'd wait for reinforcements. I exchanged glances with my brother, interest piqued in spite of myself. Odd enough to be odd on this alien world. Major Canizzaro crawled up toward the sniper team. Lieutenant Briggs followed. He waved for us to join him. Our lieutenant recognized how useful of a tool we were and had so far kept us fully informed during our ops. 11 o'clock, The spotter murmured as we reached his position. "What's that look like to you?" "Freight launcher," Lieutenant Briggs replied immediately. "Exactly," muttered Major Canizzaro. "Big one." "It's spotless," my brother frowned. "We saw a company of Shriek disappear down that hole 10 meters east about an hour ago." The Major nodded. "What do you think?" The sniper spoke for the first time. Accent from the deep south. "Sir, freight launcher that size. They're trying to move something big off-world. That's why they're dancing with our destroyers up top. Sir, I think if there's any time to go have a look-see, it's when we have these next stages of human evolution watching our sixes, sir." My brother's half-smile twitched wider. The sniper snagged a packet of smokes from a pocket and blindly offered them. "Real Marlboros from old Earth. I know you boys like 'em." After a pause, he added, "Begging your pardon, sir. Forgot my manners." "You're a good marksman, Corporal Kelly," the Major said by way of reply. My brother shook his head. I shrugged and took two, then placed the mostly empty carton on the deck between the two of the sniper team. Another crack rattled my helmet, closer than the scattering of others in the background. Most of the Marines and soldiers jolted in surprise. I felt the beginnings of another headache stab a warning shot into the base of my skull. I lifted my head a few centimeters to watch a formation of gunships launch a salvo into a block of low buildings that extended for kilometers, hovering in the air as they emptied their rocket pods. I watched the orange flashes of the detonations sending ripples through the haze of smoke and dust. Another half-second and I heard the reports. What remained of the roof began to cave inward with a ponderous slowness. I wondered how many Shriek would suffocate, entombed within the rubble. A thrum arose on the edges of my hearing, built, grew, intensified until a tearing shriek pierced the atmo. "Cover!" I knew what it was. The sound of drive engines in atmo. I'd heard it before. "Enemy fast movers! 5, no 6. A formation of sleek, angled craft flashed overhead, so quick it left barely more than the afterimage burned into my retinas. "Harpies!" My brother had time to bellow before the sound caught up. Shriek fighters. One of the few ships small enough that thrusters and drive engines designed for the void could function still within atmo. I stood, squinting against the grit thrown into the air by their passage a handful of meters above us, just in time to see the first of the plasma cannons impact the gunship formation, sending the flank Valor tumbling toward the ground in flames.